a tune of about yields of 32 tons per hectare can be expected. So again, there's a lot that have been done, a lot of varieties have been released and could be commercialized to make them, avail them to smallholders to boost production. And then again, value-added processing, which is typical for almost all the value chains in horticulture. Now, the expected benefits, so I think these are based on, again, on net present values. And so we see that, again, for example, that you have, for $1 invested, you have about $5 accruing out of it. And if you look at things like also expansion of land area, this again is likely to contribute quite significantly from investment of 5.2 billion, and this is likely to yield about 17.3 billion. And then again, value-added addition and processing, that is normally even much more quite significant in terms of the benefits that accrue than in the other interventions. So with this, these are the agroecologies that we talked about. Like I said, in general, for some of the value chains like vegetables, you can grow them almost everywhere. And but typically, we have West African humid lowlands, and then of course for things like bananas, quite a bit quite specific agroecologies. So with this, I want to thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Victor, for staying in time. So we will now move to the next presentation from the representative of the IITA and CIMIT. Expanding Africa's wheat production.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's a pleasure to be here in Nigeria, and this is my first visit to the country. At the outset, I'd like to thank the contributors to this presentation, which have been CIMIT, IMI, and more importantly, our partners. And our partners are here in the room from Nigeria, from Sudan, Ethiopia, Zimbabwe. And what we're talking about here is really not a CGIAR led initiative. It is a partnership with our colleagues in what is definitely a demand-driven initiative. So I'm putting a case up here for wheat expansion, and my presentation covers 5 areas, some background, some of the challenges that we're facing. I would say the opportunities, and there are very significant opportunities here, and to actually show that we are actually transforming agriculture, and that's through the AfDB's initiative with respect to SAD-SC. And finally, some concluding remarks. But I think, first of all, we need to put into perspective a global picture of wheat and wheat production. Wheat has grown on something like 215 million hectares. We're producing about 700 million tons annually. We're feeding 2.5 billion consumers in 89 countries where it is a staple. And it's a crop that has high calories and high protein. This schematic effectively shows Africa as being pretty clear white with very few red patches in it. And that's the big opportunity we have here in Africa. So in Africa, we're growing about 10 million hectares. It's a major staple in many countries in Africa, and if you please, in wheat consumption. Our production levels are pretty low, 2.2 ton per hectare on average, at a global average of about 3.3. So there is room for improvement. And we can see that there has been a huge shift in consumption and demand for wheat. And that's been driven predominantly by population growth, demographic change, urbanization, and effectively massive changes in dietary consumption. The problem we face in Africa is really the demand cannot meet supply internally. And when you look at a $15 billion annual expenditure on wheat imports, you have a major challenge. So to me, I think there's huge opportunities here to actually reduce that demand, that pressure on Treasury, effectively to look at imports. The gap is widening. This is a schematic of all of Africa and sub-Saharan Africa with respect to current production and consumption. I think this really tells you a story that you need to be looking at. How do I increase my production internally of wheat? It also actually points to very significant risks associated with being dependent solely on importation. And the long-term projections. Here we sit in Nigeria, and if you look at the population growth to 2050 as projected, we have very significant challenges here in this country in meeting that demand, which will invariably grow. So, the bleak picture is this. 60% of all wheat consumed in Africa is imported. If we look at just 9 years from here, in 2025, that demand will grow by 45%. If it's business as usual, the net importation that would be required is 80%. Now this will have massive impacts on Treasury, finances, and hold significant risk for the continent. So there are challenges, and those challenges we should not shy away from. Certainly we need a more integrated and best fit technologies for both rain-fed and irrigated agriculture. And I would stress that there are huge opportunities with regard to irrigated agriculture and expansion in Africa. We have a very low level of mechanization. And really we need to be thinking very carefully about this, is that on the production side of agriculture, the production side, the probability of creating more jobs is very low, particularly in the actual production system. What we've got to be looking at, and I think it'll occur, the demand for mechanization is occurring and will continue to grow. We will always have biotic stresses and abiotic stresses to manage. And that, I think, emphasizes the criticality of the breeding programs that all of the centers have in meeting effectively those challenges. And then finally, fertility, soil fertility challenges that we have in Africa are a significant constraint to boosting production in many of our commodities. There are socioeconomic challenges, access to input and output markets, enabling policies. Now, this is critical, I think. If we cannot effectively have enabling policies, the probability of whatever we're talking about here today and tomorrow will not occur. So there needs to be that political will, and I think that was stated quite clearly by many yesterday. Low competitiveness and value addition, low innovation, adoption, poor infrastructure in many of our rural areas. So these are impediments that in many cases go beyond effectively what we're putting up front, but are the issues that face expansion. And then climate change. Okay, so I'm going to be a bit more positive and say there are huge opportunities for expansion of wheat and other commodities, and that's been driven largely by land and, more importantly, by water. We're talking about a continent that has very limited development of its water resources, and here is a huge opportunity. We have opportunities to diversify both rain-fed and irrigated systems. And let me be clear, I'm not talking about crop substitution. We're talking about intensification predominantly, adding greater, you could say, cropping intensity into production systems. So it's not crop substitution. And we're talking about potentially rice-wheat systems. Why can't we emulate what has happened in the Punjab in India, in many of the regions that we're operating under irrigated agriculture? Wheat pulse systems or legume-based systems, huge opportunities for that. And then integration of livestock. We should be seeing livestock as a clear, you could say, component, critical component in many of our production systems. And also, finally, the current production in sub-Saharan Africa is only about 10 to 20% of its potential. Here we have a huge opportunity. We may question whether we can transform agriculture. And I think that's on the lips of everyone here. Ethiopia, where transformed its wheat production systems in 5 years. That's the target. We're talking about 5 years. And there were some key drivers for that transformation. Favorable policies, varieties, high-yielding, rust-resistant, with good baking quality. Seed delivery systems that effectively accelerated the pre-release seed multiplication. Agronomic packages and an effective extension system. So, the key point I want to make here is that in Ethiopia, we're talking about a doubling of the overall production in 5 years on land holdings that were approximately 1 hectare. We're talking about smallholder producers. And it moved 1.7 million farmers into commercial farmers. So here is an example that is telling you you can do it. So what do we bring to the table? I think one of the biggest advances that we can effectively point to is the emergence of heat-tolerant varieties of wheat. Through our breeding programs in Sudan, we have varieties that are far more adapted to higher temperatures. What does that mean? It means you can expand wheat production into countries where it couldn't be grown before. Nigeria, Mali, Mauritania, Niger, Senegal. It has huge potential. We have shown that you can grow wheat and receive tonnages of 4 to 6 tons per hectare in farmer fields. This is not on experiment stations, it is farmer fields. And it has very good nutritional value and effectively industrial qualities. So, an example of how this has been rolled out is through TAAT. And I think it's very clear if you look at the schematic here, where we're rolling out you could say, improved varieties into a whole suite of countries. I should point out that this is entirely demand-driven by countries. This is not a supply-driven approach that we're taking. It's entirely demand-driven. And what has been critical in achieving this is the delivery system of seeds, functional and proven seed delivery systems. And we have that. New varieties, water, and management packages are all key to success. And we can clearly see this in Nigeria, in Sudan, in Ethiopia. If you come with a package, seeds, planting, agronomic skills, you can have very dramatic impacts on production. And we're having that. And I think a case in point here is from Nigeria, where effectively you've seen in the past 2 years an increase in wheat production to where it sits at about 100,000 hectares. The objective of the government of Nigeria is in the next 2 years to expand that to 300,000 hectares. And I think it definitely can be done. You have the political will. The second component of this technological aspect is mechanization. And we have proven and developed machinery and equipment that can deliver that mechanization very efficient, very effectively. These are based on low cost and locally manufactured machines. Raised bed systems result in 20% decrease in water with a 25% increase in production. An example comes from Egypt, where we're using these machines. Over the past 2 years, they are now rolled out on 300,000 acres in 2 years. The objective of the government of Egypt is effectively to increase that to 1 million acres. So again, a proven technology. Small mechanization, two-wheel systems that have been developed. Conservation agriculture, we've shown it works in North Africa. And again, I stress, there are huge opportunities to link North Africa with Sub-Saharan Africa. There are many learnings we can take. And deficit and supplemental irrigation technologies that we have. Profitability. It is profitable to grow wheat. And we've shown this through SARD-SC that it is. Clearly, from Nigeria through to Sudan, that's the kind of returns that you're getting on your investment. And these are real figures. So you can effectively make money. Facts about wheat. We can expand it. And this graph here essentially indicates where rain-fed wheat production can be expanded into Sub-Saharan Africa. The green effectively shows you where the profitability is. The red indicates you probably have relatively little chance of growing wheat profitably. So we have already targeted areas where you can expand wheat production. I just want to stress here that this is a demand-driven initiative. It's demand-driven by countries. And what I would like to indicate is that there are countries there that are coming to us and saying, how can we increase our wheat production? We need to be quite clear. There are certain regions where this may not occur. And I highlight maybe Gambia and the Cameroon may not be high priority areas where you would want to be expanding. But there is a demand by government. Okay, so the agroecologies in which we would plan to roll this out is the cooler areas of North Africa and the tropical highlands of Sub-Saharan Africa. We see taking wheat to new frontiers in the cool, winter, irrigated environments of Africa. And here we're talking about Sahel agroecologies. So we are very targeted. I just want to also impress upon people here that North Africa is critical in wheat production. And this graph here indicates the potential increase that you can achieve in North Africa with respect to wheat production. So there are still huge yield gaps that exist. Finally, my concluding remarks. Africa feeding Africa, I believe, is a reality. And we can achieve that through Wheat for Africa. I think the biggest driver that will make this happen is a $15 billion import cost to sub-Saharan Africa, and that's growing. That, to me, is the incentive. A key factor within the wheat system is that we have already a value chain. We have the millers. We've got to be focusing on is innovation in scaling to include new business models. And those business models would effectively be service-based business models. We need to consider that there will be significant infrastructure investments, irrigation, and there are huge opportunities, as well as storage facilities. And then finally, the most important aspect is the political will and the enabling policies that will have to be there to make this happen. So thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much. Now the last presentation for the day, or at least for this morning, we come from the World Fish Center and IITA Youth Agripreneurs. Thank you. Self-sufficiency of inland fish farming.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about fish here. I'm very glad that fish has been included on the agenda. This presentation is perhaps less developed than some of the other presentations you've seen because we really haven't had a chance to work together on this. So just bear with me with the presentation. World Fish is working together, or will work together, with the IITA Youth Agripreneurs. There's some of them here in the audience, and I'm sure some of you saw the fish ponds here in the tour yesterday. We're going to talk first of all about World Fish and IIA, and then why fish is important. Also talk about the fish supply and demand. Then we'll talk about Egyptian aquaculture, Nigerian aquaculture, and the challenge ahead. So World Fish is the CG Centre that deals with fish. You can read through the mission and vision. IITA Youth Agripreneurs are bridging the gap between Africa's protein deficiency and its nutritional needs. And they have the West African hub in Ibadan here and in Abuja, with the aim of increasing fish production, income generation, and youth participation. And then the East African hub in Kenya and DRC, which is expanding aquaponics, looking at fish markets and promoting commercial aquaculture. From the World Fish side, certainly we believe that fish matter, and fish matter because it's actually the most important of all the major categories of animal source foods, as shown in this graph here. 20% of animal protein, it represents 20% of animal protein intake for 3 billion people. It's an important part of a healthy diet, and certainly the nutritional contribution that fish can make is really important. This is increasingly being recognized. Of course, everybody's heard of omega-3 fatty acids, which are essential to cognitive and physical development, especially in children. But the people who need it most are often amongst the most food and nutrition insecure. So you can see here on this graph that in Africa, the fish is blue on this graph here. But you can see that this is an animal-sourced food supply in kilos per person per year. And in Africa, the animal-sourced food supply is lowest, and also fish supply is woefully short. This is quite a familiar graph to anybody who's working in aquaculture and fisheries. It shows that the global fisheries catch is fairly static, whereas aquaculture, the dark blue, is increasing. You know, there's predictions about aquaculture surpassing fisheries production in years to come. But a lot of this aquaculture production is not in Africa, it's in other parts of the world, mainly in China and Asia. If we look at African fish supply, this is the FAO fish model, looking at supply in 2010 compared to projected supply in 2022. This model is based on existing trends rather than a demand scenario. You can see in 2010, African aquaculture was 1.38 million tons, and in fact, about 700,000 tons of that was just from Egypt. In 2022, they're projecting that the supply will be 2 million tons, and a slight increase in fishery production also in Africa. But the bottom line there is the important one, which shows that even with increased imports of 5.33 million tons in 2022, actually the per capita supply of fish is projected to decline, looking at this scenario. Now, in the TAAT proposal, we've said that there's a target of 2 million tons per year increase will be needed to replace current imports. And that's the current situation. But if we look forwards, just to maintain per capita consumption levels plus replace imports would need an extra 4.5 to 5 million tons in Africa. And if we were talking about bringing per capita consumption to a global average, which is currently about 20 kg per person per year, would need an extra 19 to 20 million tons. So that puts some numbers to really the challenge ahead. Can it be done? Well, if we look at Egyptian aquaculture, yes, it can be done. You can see here, the green is the aquaculture here, and blue is fisheries. This is data from 2003 to 2013. And you can see that aquaculture is now accounting for over 1 million tons a year of production, which has expanded very rapidly since the 1980s, so that fish farms are now producing about 3 times as much as they were 10 years ago. So that's very rapid progress. Growth of 9.7% per year, and that's equivalent to 1 fish per person per week for each Egyptian. And that's really transformed per capita availability of fish in Egypt. So it's now around 20 kg per person per year, whereas 10 years ago it was only 15 kg per person per year. So it can happen. The species that we use, Nile tilapia, there's mullets, catfish, carp as well. Culture. Feed mills. That's is for aquaculturability. So how, in Egyptian aquaculture, there was an institutional and legal framework set up. There was an organisation called the General Authority for Fisheries Resources Development, land leasing arrangements set up for farmers, water supply, also training for key personnel. There were a lot of people sent to the US for training in the 1980s. And then also they set up research stations, fish farms, feed mills. And that's created the opportunity to build profitable private sector businesses. Small-scale businesses as well as large-scale. Most of the farms are, the average farm size is around 10 hectares and employs about 10 people. So there's hatcheries, feed mills, the fish farms themselves, wholesalers and retailers. And it's about a $2 billion sector now. It's worth about that much. And you have a value chain which is fairly clear-cut, and different people understand the different roles in it. It's not perfect. There's lots of things that still need to be improved, particularly in terms of the marketing side of the value chain. But it's a concrete value chain that's developed in quite a short time. Nigerian aquaculture, this is just FAO statistics. It shows the growing importance of aquaculture in Nigeria. Egypt is a pond-based tilapia system. This is mainly catfish farming, some tilapia as well. And here you have the IITA youth agripreneurs, and they started with training from Durant Fish Farm. I think there's somebody from Durant here. And there was 4 abandoned fish ponds that were reconstructed. They've been stocked and built up. There's been backstopping from Durant. They stocked the fish. They've been able to harvest fish and make a profit with a cost-benefit ratio of 1.1 to 1.5. And now additional ponds have been built, so that's what you see here. And there's been training for other youth entrepreneurs and other hubs, and they've been looking at adding value through smoking and expanding to Abuja, Kenya and DRC. Their aim in the future is to penetrate other fish markets in other African countries, to increase fish production and income for youth, disseminate fish farming technology to small-scale farmers, and increase opportunities along the value chain. World Fish, we're like most of the other CG centres, we've been in the throes of developing new CRP proposals, and these are some of the targets in the fish CRP, which has just been submitted. Target of 4.9 million producer households using improved breeds, feeds, fish health, and aquaculture and fisheries management practices. 3.5 million people exiting poverty, 2.5 million fewer people suffering from deficiencies in essential micronutrients. This is really something we're focused on very much now. And also dietary diversity, so 4.7 million more women of reproductive age consuming the adequate number of food groups. We're looking at a target of 4.8 million tonnes increase in farmed fish production, but with a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and also an improvement in water and nutrient efficiency management, development, scaling to Ghana. And really the focus is on building I wanted to have an opportunity to discuss with my colleagues here before we really put down numbers or concrete actions. But that target of 2 million tonnes per year, the big challenge I see there is that it will need additional space. Unlike most of the commodities you're talking about here, where you can upgrade technology, you're talking about yield gaps. Aquaculture does not have the space to produce 2 million tonnes at present. The 2 million tonnes a year, in my head, if you used Egyptian systems, is the equivalent of about 300,000 hectares of extra pond area. So we need to think of where those ponds would be, in which country, or of course there are alternative systems using so on. So we need few areas designated, and one of the leading ways to do this now is through setting aside what they call aquaculture parks or development zones, where, like in Egypt, where you say this area is for aquaculture. Because if you're just dependent upon small-scale fish ponds, you're never going to reach those targets. And then once you have the actual capacity there and the demand, then you get the feed mills, you get the investment in feed mills, hatcheries, and market infrastructure that really build it up into a sustainable sector. So that we've got lots of work to do this afternoon on that in the fish group, and putting numbers behind that. But, thank you for your time. Yeah.
Thank you. Now we will invite the presenters to the podium right behind me. We need 4 chairs. For the questions and answers session. So may we please have the representative of eCraft Africa Harvest IITA for the presentation yesterday on renovating tree plantations. Fantastic. The Victor, who presented on, or any other person in that group, expanding horticulture, expanding Africa's wheat. Fantastic. So again, now we are in the question and answer session. So please, may I see hands that would like to ask questions? Okay, madam, you are number 1. Gentleman behind you, you're number 2. Lady, you're number 3. The guy behind you is number 4. Number 5, number 6, number 7, number 8, number 9, and 10. Please, your name, your organization, and of course, 1 or 2 minutes. Number 11. Number 12. Okay. Yeah, please just ask your question. Number 1, please. Number 1. Go ahead.
Regina Kapinga, IITA. Yeah, I don't know the rationale behind putting sweet potato, plantain, and bananas in the horticultural group.
Okay, fantastic. Number 2. Number 2. You are number 2. Are you number 2? Okay, if there is no number 2, we
No, there is number 2, sir. Thank you so much, sir. I want to appreciate all the presenters. In all the presentations so far made, I have not actually seen a defined role of NARIS. I've not seen it. And yesterday it was pointed out that the project omitted gender issue. Now I have not even seen where we have youth empowerment in all these presentations. So I want you to actually address those issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Number 3, please. Please, mic. We need mics to be moving. Kindly give your name and ask the question so that we know you.
Thank you. I'm Laurence Jassogne from IITA, and my question is related to climate change. So we've seen in a couple of presentations that climate change is a threat. but there's already a lot of information related to the impact of climate change on all those different crops. And especially when I see presentations looking at expansion of crops and new areas for crops, how is information related to changes in suitability taken into consideration for climate smart investments? Because some of these areas might actually not be suitable in the future. So is that information available, and is that information used in order to plan for all the investments we're discussing here?
Thank you. Number 4, please. Your name and question.
Thank you. Bamidele Omitoyin is my name, from the Department of Aquaculture and Fisheries Management, University of Ibadan. My question is, on what basis was the 2 million ton per year calculated? And then apart from the catfish and tilapia, are there other species that were programmed into that program? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Number 5.
Number 5, my name is Martin Fregene, AfDB. My question is to both the fish and the wheat presenters. As you can see, you've had some tremendous success with successful technologies being adopted in several countries. In Egypt, the tilapia, in Nigeria, the wheat, and in some other places. You know, it would have been good to give us a description of what were the fundamental elements of success, factors for success in those outreach. I know the fish guy tried to talk a little bit about Egypt, but I think we should go beyond that. Who are the key actors? You know, what were the key processes? You know, what was the structure? So because this whole thing is about outreach, and we need to get some real meat around that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Number 6.
Number 6. My name is Robin Buguchara from CGIAR. My question is actually linked with the number 3 on climate change. And just to add on what she has asked, because that was also my interest, was that from yesterday, Jonas clearly mentioned that technologies that need to be developed have to be climate smart. But then there are also, as we know, possibilities and risks of vulnerability. And the question is that it hasn't come out clear across the different areas and value chains on how this is considered, but also to inform that there's some efforts going on to assess climate smart agriculture profiles in different countries at the request of countries, and some of the information is probably available, and some efforts are going on, and there could be opportunities to have some of these as baselines and also to assess vulnerability as we consider climate smart options and technologies under this program.
Thank you. So we go to number 7.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My name is Francis Abraman Sanko, the Chief Agricultural Officer or Director General of Agriculture, Forestry and Food Security, Sierra Leone. I want to say the presentations have been very good. The issues have been clearly outlined, but what is not coming out is that we in West Africa and in a number of countries, we do lack the institutions to handle key aspects as far as agriculture is concerned. I listened carefully yesterday during the opening remarks by the DG of IITA. He told us the availability of fertilizers in the farming systems need to be thoroughly organized and put out of business people, so which means we need institutions. Then also, the availability of farm machinery, appropriate farm machineries. These are in short supply in many countries. For many years, we have been relying on heavy tractors, heavy caterpillars, which are not, I will say they are beyond the reach of many farmers. What I would like to see coming out of this meeting, this gathering, is that how IITA and other institutions can intermediate between the financial institutions, ADB, World Bank, on one side, and the governments in the African continent to establish institutions that can handle the availability of inputs. The knowledge is there based on the presentations here. We need bankable projects. We want to establish irrigation systems. Our continued reliance on rain-fed agriculture will not move us if we have all the technologies made available. Those institutions must be there, they must be supported. The governance structures in different countries must also be revisited. The goodwill on the part of government to move agriculture is very, very critical. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. Number 8, please. Number 8. Number 8 is going. Number 9. Number 9. Is that number 8?
Chairman.
8 or 9?
9.
Fantastic.
My name is Adil Abdurrahim. I'm from the Agricultural Research Corporation, Sudan. As we might know that Sudan is now working at a hub for heat tolerance in wheat for the region and beyond. This is because most of the varieties which were selected under Sudan condition work very well under other hot environments, especially in West Africa. With the adoption of these hot tolerant varieties and the accompanied agronomic practices, the yield has been increased tremendously under farmer conditions, from almost 2 to 3 tons per hectare to 3.5 to 5 tons per hectare this year. And 3.6 hectare for ton per hectare is under the Jazeera condition, Central Sudan, and 5 tons for the under North Sudan condition, which is a little bit more favorable for wheat with temperature of 3 to 5 degrees centigrade less than the that of the Central Sudan conditions. And this year, there was almost no difference between the demo field, the demonstration plots, and the farmers' fields. You see, we have around this year 3,000 demos, which were operated by the two projects, SADC project and the food security project. SADC is funded by the African Development Bank, and food security project is funded by the Arab funds. Under these projects, we were able to increase, to raise the average yields, and to almost minimize or almost there is, you can say, no gaps between the demos and farm fields. And Sudan now can, with 2,000 to 250,000 hectares, which we are growing this year, can produce up to 900,000 tons, which almost cover around 35% of its consumption. And this is because of the adoption of these technologies and because of the strong political will, which was represented in provision of microfinance for inputs, and as well as incentive prices for the products. For Sudan, the 5-year plans, which will end in 2019, the project is to project an area of 1.5 million hectare, mainly in Central Sudan condition, Jazeera and Ward 9, Alpha around 0.5 million, and 1 million hectare in North Sudan. And this needs maybe irrigation infrastructure, the expansion in North Sudan. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the information on Sudan. Now we go to number 10. Number 10. Number 10 is going?
No, it's not going. I'm here.
Good.
This number 10. You're 11.
Okay, don't worry. You have opportunity, please. Please.
with the World Local Foundation.
Your name?
Number
Okay,
11.
I've been asked to shout now. Yeah, my name is Paul Ilona of Harvest Plus, Nigeria. Now, looking at
My name is Isaac Ayilagwe from the Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta. And my question is directed at ICRAF and the
person that would like to make an intervention. Okay, that's you, the last one, please.
Thank you. I'm Christopher Su from Iraq, Cameroon. My question is directed to Simit on the wheat presentation. I was surprised Cameroon was put in red. Meanwhile, Cameroon is believed to be Africa in miniature, having all the ecologies found in Africa. Currently in the Western Highlands and the Adamawa savannas, wheat is doing extremely well there, high production. So I don't know the criteria of putting Cameroon in red. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we go to the panel, to the panelists. I'm sure you have the questions addressed to each of you. We will start with
variety, a variety that has a processing trait, and it's much more robust. Now, question 8 and 9 do not apply to me. Question 10 is on the exports. That there was a huge exports for some of the crops, but there was no domestic research led by the private sector. And I think that I did give an example, which is just what I also mentioned again. I did give examples of Frigoken in Kenya, working with several smallholders. And again, I just mentioned the issue of Dash Industries in Tanzania. So these models have already been there. And even though, of course, what happens is that most of these private genetic material is developed by the private research centers, and then, of course, the private sector take them up and commercialize. Now, sometimes the challenge with the private sector is that most of these institutions are public institutions, and then, of course, the private sector wants exclusivity, to be able to commercialize some of the varieties, and that's where sometimes it can be a challenge as to who should make that investment. But I think within the framework of a project like this, the roles can be quite clearly defined. There was an issue about tissue culture in banana. I don't know if Michael from Africa Harvest is here. Probably he can address that directly. So I will then do one.
I think these questions group quite nicely. So let me start with the first two related to climate change, because I think that's a very important issue which perhaps deserves more discussion during the work. Tony, in his presentation yesterday, was galloping through, so I'm not sure whether people actually were able to see, but he did put up two climate change maps that come from the CGIAR IITA collaborative work, one for cocoa and one for coffee, that shows suitability mapping. And it's interesting that in those two key crops, the climate change effects are quite different, and the extent to which you can adapt to them are very different as well. So high temperatures for cocoa, you can actually manage by managing shade to some extent. The evapotranspiration issues resulting in longer dry seasons and not enough water being available is essentially makes things unsuitable, and we're already seeing those effects in some parts of the range. So taking climate change into account, but needing to get beyond suitability maps to take into account the adaptation element, and that's where the proven technologies need to come out in order to address maintaining production in relation to climate change, and incentivizing change of the areas where some crops are being grown. So that, I think, is critical, and I think there's been a lot of progress that can be put into practice in this program. That comes on to the three questions that were relating to the role of NARS, the importance of institutions, and what are the ingredients of success. And I think what matters about ingredients of success here is success at scale. I think that's the critical issue. And, there's been an awful lot of emphasis on participatory research in many contexts over the past quarter of a century, which has tended to lead to getting things just right for a particular community. And when you go to another community down the road, things are not optimized there. So spreading, scaling is actually problematic. And if we're going to address these key problems of producing enough Africa, feeding Africa, then it needs to be done at scale, and that requires meeting demand at all three levels. I think sometimes our discussion of demand has been a bit simplistic over the last couple of days. There's the regional level demand that we can look at, and we've seen a lot of regional statistics, and we can show where the key priorities for change are at a regional level if you're going to address some of these production issues. The second is the country level demand, which comes through countries having particular plans, investing and taking up loan opportunities. But then there's also the demand of the individual farmers who are actually going to be making a difference. And in the smallholder farming sector, there's a very fine-scale variation in the context that those individual farmers are making. And a lot of what we need in terms of getting the technology out there is adapting technology to the context that varies at fine scale. Luckily, we have proven methods for doing that, and that's very important in the perennial crop sector. There were two specific questions, one from the World Cocoa Foundation and one about indigenous trees. I'm looking forward to the sessions when we can discuss technologies. Tony was talking very quickly. He did put some things up but didn't really have time to expand on them, so I think we've got a good opportunity to be clearer about what technologies are available and who they're relevant to during the discussion session. In relation to the broader range of indigenous fruit trees and other Cinderella species that have been had quite a lot of domestication effort, obviously they don't really fit in to the cocoa, coffee, cashew rejuvenation of tree plantations. But they're incredibly important in the savanna and in the Sahel context, because they're key components of the farming systems and the maintenance and the increase in production. So I hope we can see the perennial element as those major crops, cocoa, coffee, and also other species that need to then link into those agroecology elements. Thank you.
I'll just talk about the fish questions. There was a question about how the 2 million tonnes target was set, and I think that was based on projected gap between supply and demand. I don't think that's ambitious enough. I think we can probably go beyond that. As I've argued, aquaculture is capable of growing quickly in the right circumstances. There's a question over species, whether we can look at other species apart from catfish and tilapia. Of course, but the key element needs to be profitability. There needs to be an opportunity for producers to be able to make a profit. You'll find with a lot of other species that, you may be struggling. The other element that comes into this is really we need to focus on systems that produce fish to feed Africans. So we need to look at bottom of the pyramid markets, not top of the pyramid markets, certainly from the world fish point of view. So catfish and tilapia fit that, whereas, for example, some of the marine species, you're looking at export markets, which is fine, but not something that World Fish as an organisation is really that interested in. Okay, I think that's most of the fish things. There was quite a few wheat questions.
Okay. I think there are three groupings. First of all, the enabling environment. There was a question about enabling environment, and I can lump that with effectively NAS and the important role that NAS will play in any of what we're trying to or attempt to do with regard to wheat. And I think the most critical factor is the political will, effectively, that creates that enabling environment in order for you to move forward. Without that, I think what we're trying to do or attempt to do will never really grow. The second aspect is on climate change. I think we presented quite clearly a technology there of climate change adaptation, and that's associated with tolerant wheat varieties that have been developed. On top of that, the fact that irrigation is a critical component in the expansion of wheat. All are, you could say, technological innovations that will effectively reduce the risk associated with the production of wheat in a future climate. Another point that I want to make on that is the importance, essentially, of learning from parts of North Africa and the Middle East, because the climates that are presented there today are the climates of the future that you will see in sub-Saharan Africa. So there's a huge opportunity of a South-South learning. And then finally, with respect to Cameroon, I do apologize. Let me be clear about Cameroon. We were thinking specifically here about the lowlands, which would not be suitable at all for wheat production. However, the highlands are certainly there. So Cameroon's more than welcome. Thank you.
So I think we have to close. Thank you very much. Can we please give a round of applause to Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Well, we've closed a very long session this morning, from yesterday. And the session has given us the opportunity to have all the background we need for the group work. We've also had the opportunity to have at least 50 to 60% understanding of the TAAT. The rest, if you've not understood what the TAAT is about or how the clearing mechanism, the clearing house mechanism will work, you still have another opportunity in the group work. So I will ask each of you to participate actively in the group work. And the motto here is, how do we make it work? We need your brains to ensure that we make this program work. On this note, I want to thank all of you for giving me opportunity to chair this session, and for also giving your contributions that made this session a very successful one, at least from my own assessment. Thank you very much.
I think we should give another round of applause, not only for the chairman, but for all of the presentations since yesterday. It's just been wonderful. Before we go into the different groups, I want to first of all appreciate everyone who has returned the questionnaires on institutions, and to appeal for the others to come in. Even if I get them tomorrow morning, that's fine. But please give some thought to the questions. There are a couple of institutions where I noticed that the section on constraints, that there's nothing there. So I'm assuming that you have no problem. I think we need to give some very serious thought to all of these kinds of issues. I know that there are some people who have come newly today, and some people who were not able to fill in the forms yesterday. I did make out the lists according to your preferences as much as possible. There were a couple of people who indicated 3 and 4 groups, so I used my discretion as to where to put them. But for the most part, anybody who said just one group that they wanted to join, I put them there. And I think many of you have checked already to see whether your name is there. If your name is not there, please, again, let me know. But I have tried to update it this morning. I have just gotten a few about 5 minutes ago, and so they're not on the list. But please, if you have indicated where you want to go, join that group. You are most welcome. Please also forgive me if the names are wrongly spelled. Some of the handwriting was wonderful. As a teacher, I'm used to that, but still. let me just present very briefly the lists. These are I hope everything is showing. Oops, almost. But like I said, for the most part, wherever you indicated you wanted to be is where you will be. There are a couple of groups, such as the rice and the cassava and a couple of others that are very big. And I think we're going to need the wisdom of God in order to coordinate. And I pray that the chairpersons will have the ability to keep the group as one group and not many groups. But the one for self-sufficiency in rice production will be in the Vigna room. People would take you, please just gather together, and then people would take you to the rooms that are not here or in iHouse. Intensification of cassava is another very large group, and it's going to be in the Manihat. Forgive me if I say it wrong. I'm not an Greek proper person. And then food security in the Sahel is another, okay, that one is not so big. It's in the iHouse meeting room. Go to the iHouse, there is a boardroom just in back of the reception. This is a very large one, the Transforming Africa's Savannas into Bread Baskets. It's also quite broad in its scope. And so we'll be interested to see what will come out of that. That will be in the Musa room. Now we have three groups which are relatively smaller, and I suppose that might be an advantage or it might be a disadvantage, whichever way you look at it. But the renovating tree plantations will be here in the conference room. We're going to have three groups here. So you can take here, here, and there. You can situate yourselves. The expanding horticulture is also a relatively large group, and that's going to be in the, let me just say the yam room, because I'm not very good at saying it's in the building with yam. Expanding Africa's wheat production is probably the smallest group, and that's going to be here in Conference Center. Then inland fish farming will also be here in the Conference Center. Now, issues for discussion. We will give you these lists. We are trying to make these discussions very focused, and that's why we are giving you lists of issues that should be considered, and also some of the topics under them, so that hopefully we will stay on track. We will not go too far off track. And we do have a time problem. We are going to adjust the timetable slightly so that we will not miss doing what we're supposed to do. Today is critically important for this achieving our goals at the end of this workshop. So we are going to change the timetable somewhat to ensure that we have maximum time for these groups. Also, the way you see it on the timetable is changing also. You don't have groups 1 and 4, 1 and 4. You have now groups 1 to 8. And so all of the groups are going to be meeting simultaneously. Interventions, this is really the main thrust. And this is why we want to go into this initially. We want to hit the ground running, really. And we're going to be looking specifically at technologies. Remember, this is technology for agricultural transformation. So we are looking at technologies. It is crucial. And the approaches and the strategies and so on. We are going to be looking at TAAT itself in terms of the function and roles, how you see it. And all of this, please, is going to be specific to your own priority intervention area, your own value chains. If you are in fisheries, don't worry about cassava. They'll take care of themselves, all right? We want it very specific. And then the partnerships. Because partnerships, as we've heard since yesterday, are crucially important to the successful implementation of all of this. Linkages, not only linkages between different, in some cases you may find more than one value chain. We can see situations where there may be more than one value chain that is in an intervention area. Then constraints, again, reiterating the fact that this is not much research oriented. We also want you to identify risks and concerns, and then value additions and processing. These are the issues to be covered in the next maybe 1.5 hours. So you know you have a very big task. What we are proposing is that we are going to go for coffee break now, which I hope will not take more than 15 minutes at the most, because we're really tight on time. We've already, well, due to yesterday's overflow, we are behind by about 1.5 hours already. So we don't want to keep you here until 9 o'clock tonight. So that's why we want to try to adjust things. So we will go for coffee break now from about 10:30 to 10:45. And so from 10:45 until 12, you will have your first session. Please take note of these, because you're going to be in different places. So we don't want to have to go running all over IITA trying to find participants when one thing or the other is supposed to be done. So we will go from 10:30 now, 10:45 until 12 for the first session. And then we're going to have group reports. And these group reports are just going to be 10 minutes. You are going to have your own chairperson and your own rapporteur for your group. And we want to see, after this first session, that everybody is on track and how far they've been able to go. So if somebody says that all they've been able to do in the last 1.5 hours is talk about interventions, then you know you have a lot of catching up to do before we get to the second session. And so then we'll go for lunch at the stipulated time, hopefully, from 1:30 to 2:30, because we're going to come back here. Let me reiterate that. We will come back here by 12. And we will be here until 1:30, and we will give each group 10 minutes to present. And we're going to be very strict with time, please. So when you are making your summary presentations, make sure that they are not too long, because we will have to be very, very strict with time. So that will last from 12 until about 1:30 or thereabout. We will go for lunch from 1:30 until 2:30. 2:30, we have to get back to some serious work, because that's going to be the second session. It will be 2 hours. We will give you additional issues to consider, as well as we want you to fill in a logical framework, result-based framework. And so the issues that you will be considering in the first session and the second session now will be able to be incorporated into that framework. And then we will meet back here again at 4:30 for coffee break, 4:30 to 4:45, 4:45 to 6:45, as it is in the original timetable. We will then have reports from each of the groups, 15 minutes each. It's tight, and there's a lot to do, but I am very sure that we will be able to accomplish a lot before the end of today. And so please, once again, if you are in group 1, someone will take your group to Vigna room, unless you know. Okay? All right. If you, okay. If you are in group 1, follow this gentleman. He's going to take you to the Vigna room. Unless you know IITA very well and know where you're going anyway. The group 2, Cassava group, is going to the Manahat. Somebody said, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. I'm a rural sociologist, sorry. Mabinu. He will show you where to go for group 2. Group 3, you will all be able to find your way. That's in I-House, in the meeting room right behind the reception. Group 4, the Transforming Africa Savannas into Bread Baskets, will be in Musa room, and he will be the one to take you. Just try to gel together, and you know where you can go. Group 5, Conference Center, you're right here. Group 5 is tree plantations. Group 6, horticulture. You are going to be in the yam room. Who is taking it? He's going to take them. And Group 7 will be here in the conference center. That's wheat production. And Group 8, inland fish farming, will be here as well. Are we clear? Nobody will get lost? All right. Thank you so much. All the best. Okay, now